While strolling around this year's Ohio State Fair, one of the most recognizable people you'll meet, Abraham Lincoln. Really, he's John Cooper, but when he's here, he's Abe Lincoln. He stays in costume, and he loves to talk to people. Abe, first of all, what's it like when you look around the fairground today as compared to many years ago?
Well, back in my day, we did have fairs. We had state fairs, but the state fairs were strictly livestock and agricultural products. Nothing like the big extravaganza that you see here. It's kind of amazing that there's so much to distract people.
Actually, distract, huh?
Yeah, distract. Makes my job a little bit harder here, getting people to stop and talk to an old dead president.
But you got to admit, with the top hat and the full coat, a lot of young people today who, well, they paid attention in history class because they recognize you right off.
I even had a little 4-year-old. He called me my name right off the bat. Hey, you're Abraham Lincoln. And I asked him, well, how do you know that? And he says, because you got that tall hat and a black beard. So even young people that young know who President Lincoln was.
They know who President Lincoln was, and you're here to help share that story. Tell us about some of the things that you're sharing with young people here at the State Fair.
Well, I like to tell them a little bit about why President Lincoln was important in terms of preserving the Union. That's probably why many people consider President Lincoln to be the greatest president of all time. If it were not for his staying on course, it would have been very easy during the Civil War to have offered reconciliation to the South in order to end the war, and that would have been the easiest thing for President Lincoln to do. But despite the unpopularity of the war in the North, and there were many who wanted to get rid of President Lincoln during the middle of the war, he still wanted to preserve the Union, and he continued on to the ultimate victory. If it were not for that, we might be two nations today.
Now, tell us a little bit about the John Cooper side of Abraham Lincoln. You're from right here in Central Ohio.
I am from Central Ohio. I've been doing Abraham Lincoln for a little over 20 years. I started doing Abraham Lincoln for my children when they were in elementary school, and continued to the last of my 4 children finished elementary school, and that was probably about 5 years ago. Now I'm doing Lincoln for adult presentations, and have added things like this fair. This is my first opportunity to appear at a fair.
Is it easy to stay incognito? I mean, once you're dressed, you're obviously Abe, you recognize the name Abe, and I mean, do you ever find yourself coming and going from John or Abe and sometimes have to catch yourself?
No, not at all. I'm pretty good at staying in character. The toughest part about staying in character is the questions that people ask. A lot of people like to know about my assassination, and normally I try to avoid that. And then the other part is people want to compare Abraham Lincoln to other presidents, including the current administration, and I really try and avoid that too. I also don't want to politicize Abraham Lincoln with later generations or with the current administration. My personal view when I get out of character in terms of comparing Lincoln to the current administration is I advise people that you cannot evaluate a presidential administration until it is in the past. You really don't know what might happen. Had I not been assassinated right after the war ended, I might have ended up unpopular just like George H.W. Bush did.
How hard was it to get a good understanding and be able to present the history of Abe Lincoln? Because a lot of people know Abe Lincoln as a president, but they don't know a lot of the things that probably come up in questions to talk about.
Well, that's one area where I share a whole lot of commonality with Abraham Lincoln. We both love to read. And you learn about something or a character like Abraham Lincoln and history, his life in the Civil War, by just reading a lot. I have an extensive personal library. Most of it is historical books. I read about history of all ages, but especially because of my characterization of Lincoln, I read a whole lot about that era.
Let's go back to in character, Abraham Lincoln. Abraham, how tall are you?
I'm 6'4" tall.
And what was your lifespan?
My lifespan was 56 years.
And you were born where?
Born in Hodgenville, Kentucky in 1809, February 12th to be exact.
And most people recognize you really, though, from being from an entirely different area.
They recognize me from being from Springfield, Illinois. That's where I settled when I was getting close to about 30 years old. I moved to Illinois when I was 23 and then moved up to Springfield a little bit later, just before it became capital of Illinois.
Your most recognized single line?
Probably just 7 years ago. The start of the address that I gave at the battlefield of Gettysburg when we dedicated a cemetery there in November of 1863.
And most school kids have a real close connection to that because their teacher tried to get them to memorize the entire Gettysburg Address, and they worked a long time on it.
I would guess many school kids at one time or another have memorized that, and in my presentations I usually recite the Gettysburg Address, and I've taken great pains to try and get it as accurate as I can because I know half of the audience is probably repeating the words with me.
Now, if somebody would like to have you come out to their event, their school, their fair, whatever it might be, how can they get a hold of you?
I do have a website, and my website is www.4, that's F-O-U-R score, 7 yearsago.com.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. If you're traveling to State Fair or any other event, you might see Abraham Lincoln, also known as John Cooper from Central Ohio. Abe, thanks for the update, and when next time you're out at the Ohio State Fair, we'll stop and hope you say hello to Abe, and maybe you'll ask him a tough question. Until next time, I'm Dale Minyo, and I'll see you down the road. Down the Road is brought to you in part by Prince Agra, makers of Omnigen AF, advancing animal nutrition for healthy animals, and Woodruff Enterprise of Springfield, Ohio.